Welcome to our webinar, a training on steps to control your Azure migration costs. If you have any questions as we go along, just please type them into the chat pod. At the end of the webinar, we will read everything aloud, and our presenters will answer the questions as best as they can. If you want to contact them, you can email them here using their email addresses afterwards. They're always eager to talk with prospects, partners, customers, just interested parties about our Azure solutions. And just a little bit of background on our partners. So we're joined by Taylor Farnham. He's an alliances director here at Archera, focused on Microsoft Azure. He helps organizations maximize the return on their investments in the cloud and has been working with Microsoft and Microsoft partners since 2016. We're also going to be joined by Joshua Corbett. He's our field CTO for Azure. Joshua is a solutions architect with over a decade of experience leading cloud migration, app modernization, DevOps, and digital transformation projects in the enterprise. He's held numerous Microsoft Azure certifications, including Architect Expert, DevOps Engineer Expert, and AI Engineer Associate. So hopefully he'll be able to join here and gives us some technical background as well. Also, everybody who's registered, sometimes folks can't attend the entire session. We'll get a link to the recording and we'll send that out soon after the session ends. So with that, I'm going to let Taylor take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everybody for joining. So we've taken care of introductions. So next on the agenda will be Azure cost management strategies. Then we'll cover the challenges with kind of the default approach to Azure cost management. And then we'll introduce a new approach to Azure commitments to solve some of those challenges. And then, of course, we've got some time at the end to address some of the questions that you're submitting. So first off, what do customers tell us about cloud costs? Number one is that they lack predictability, right? Particularly for customers who are coming from on-prem, where they're paying for everything kind of upfront, setting up a data center. They can kind of predict their costs over the course of a year, compared to the cloud, where a lot of consumption is on demand. It's highly scalable, highly variable as a result. It can become difficult to actually forecast how much a customer or organization will spend on Azure. And really, they're looking for predictability. Even though they value kind of the elasticity of the cloud, they still value predictability at the same time. Customers also tell us that when it comes to cloud commitments, so these could be MAC agreements, or as we'll cover in today's presentation, reservations and savings plans on Azure. They want to commit because that gets them discounts, but they don't want to overcommit because that would be paying for something they don't use. And so to protect against overcommitment and kind of the downside risk associated with that, they tend to undercommit. A reasonable approach, but an approach that does leave discounts on the table. So we're going to propose a new way to kind of protect against that downside. And then, ultimately, all of this rolls up to customers want to do more with less, right? They can get more done with the budgets that they have if they can consume cloud and Azure specifically more efficiently, right? So being able to forecast will allow them to consume more efficiently, and being able to commit to just the amount that they really need and get the discounts that they're eligible for. Can help them consume more efficiently and consequently, complete more projects in the cloud and eventually, complete more of the workloads, migrations, modernizations, what have you, in Azure as a result. So if we take a look at the current kind of landscape for, how to combine various savings instruments on Azure, the typical recommendations, fall into, these four areas. One is reservations, right? So this is kind of a specific, VM family or other kind of resource that customers believe won't change over the course of 1 year or 3 years, that has fairly predictable usage patterns. That typically fits a reservation. Customers looking at savings plans are essentially happy with slightly less discount if they're able to get a bit more flexibility out of it. So they can actually move across VM families, for instance, in the compute savings plan. So it's a different trade-off between discounts and flexibility. And then Azure Hybrid Use Benefit is very useful, particularly for Windows and SQL Server workloads, where customers can actually take licensing from on-prem, move it into the cloud to reduce their overall cloud cost and unlock additional savings. And then finally, using kind of the native cost management tools in Azure, Azure Cost Management specifically, can help customers track their savings as well as identify new optimization opportunities. So that's kind of the status quo for what most customers look at. What we do is we take a commitment-centered approach. So some of those, reservations and savings plans that we're talking about, that's really what we focus on. So in terms of kind of the quadrants that we're looking at, we're in the purple area where we're helping customers purchase and manage commitments, as well as helping them negotiate enterprise terms and credits. So purely kind of a financial commitment-centric model compared to more of kind of like an infrastructure impacting model. So a lot of customers are, engaged in right sizing, replatforming, reprovisioning, either themselves or with a trusted partner. These are activities that are worthwhile, but they're also, they require engineering effort and they involve architectural changes, infrastructure changes in general. So it's something that we intentionally don't do with this, with kind of our offerings, and we are more of a financial overlay to a customer's existing architecture or those kind of right sizing activities. So the benefits of that, of course, are that it doesn't impact infrastructure. That's something that does require engineering kind of oversight, at least, and probably engineering effort to achieve. And it can be costly for the customer to make those changes. So we can kind of reduce the cost of implementing something like that. We can also provide actually higher savings purely through this financial model compared to, let's say terminating unused resources, which saves a little bit of money, but not quite as much as this model does. The challenges, of course, with kind of the default commitment offerings on Azure are that they require commitments, right, of 1 year or more. So often, you can really only unlock savings, the most savings, through a 3-year commitment. It also requires financial, FinOps teams, engineering teams, whoever happens to be responsible for cloud costs within an organization, requires them to navigate through millions of infrastructure and commitment combinations to kind of analyze, okay, what are we using today? What would reservations and savings plans actually cover? And what should we commit to? And that's, it involves uncertainty as you kind of go into the future and do a forecasting exercise. And then the risk, of course, with that uncertainty is that they'll overcommit. And to protect against that risk, they tend to go with on-demand consumption, which means they miss savings opportunities, right? So those challenges are basically because of how default commitments work, right? So if we take savings plans or reservations on Azure, you can achieve more savings the longer term length you commit to. So greatest savings come from 3-year commitments, but that's all fixed coverage. So if you want to make an architectural change later, it's basically a decision between, well, do we want to pay for something we're not going to use, i.e. that reservation that they decided on, or are we just going to hold off on that architectural change, which means holding off on the benefits that change would bring. So there are a lot of challenges, as you can imagine, when customers are considering these commitments. One is, resource demands can change. That's one of the reasons customers are in the cloud in the first place, to give them that flexibility to actually change their architecture and kind of meet, changing business needs. When they lift and shift from on-prem to the cloud, their initial VM sizes may not actually fit their long-term needs. There's often a kind of phase 2 to a lift and shift where they make architectural changes to take make better use of the elasticity of the cloud. Data migration happens in stages. So storage and compute requirements may fluctuate as a customer migrates to the cloud. Application setup often results in kind of staggered migration, which also results in inconsistent resource usage. Project schedules may change. That's just something that anybody managing a project has seen before. And that will introduce migration delays, and that will actually affect optimization of reservations, right? And then organizational changes. The company may just change strategies. The original reservations that they made may no longer be needed, in which case they would essentially be wasted. from a cost perspective. So those are the kind of the results. And then to combat these challenges, the traditional approach has been to essentially right size first. So basically, once you do the lift and shift to the cloud, consume on demand until you can actually right size something within hopefully a few months. But in reality, it could actually take years for a customer to fully modernize that architecture. And so they're sitting there consuming on demand, not getting the best rates they could because they want to maintain that flexibility to make architectural changes. Customers tend to start slow. So they'll begin with smaller commitments and scale up as their usage patterns stabilize and only commit to highly predictable workloads. Perfectly reasonable considering that they're sacrificing flexibility when they commit to reservations savings plans. And they go through regular reviews to prevent overcommitment, and they kind of double or triple check with their engineers before actioning reservations to make sure that they're not planning some sort of architectural change that would make that reservation go unused. And in long-term planning, there's kind of a need to predict what kind of specific Azure resources they'll use, even down to the VM class or family, and which can become, pretty difficult on a 3-year time frame to actually predict that kind of thing. So what Archera does is actually introduce a new pattern, right? So customers can now modernize on their schedule, right? Flexible commitments allow you to modernize apps according to your business needs now, instead of according to what reservations we have in place, right? It enables customers to attain greater commitment coverage. And of course, greater coverage means better rates overall on cloud spend. So you can commit to long terms for predictable workloads, but actually have shorter term commitments for the rest. It provides a single pane of glass to grant finance and engineering teams visibility, so they don't have to constantly actively check with each other. They can just maintain visibility into what's going on with consumption and commitment utilization. This single pane of glass also surfaces new recommendations as new infrastructure comes online or goes offline. And then it provides forecasting, more accurate forecasting based on actual prior usage, less guesswork involved, less kind of comparing spreadsheets of Azure resources to plans and so on, and enables organizations to plan for the future, but also retain flexibility to make changes according to business needs. To get more specific about how we're kind of helping customers implement this new paradigm, we provide a new way to save, and that's an insured commitment. So if we think about the default commitment offerings in blue on the right-hand side of the screen, there are 1-year savings plans and 1-year RIs, and of course 3-year instruments. But just taking the 1-year examples, you could save about 25% on virtual machine consumption on Azure with a 1-year savings plan, and about 35% with a 1-year reservation. Archera can provide about 30% savings for only a 30-day commitment. So first of all, that's quite a bit more flexible than a 1-year or 3-year commitment. So that covers a lot of workloads that couldn't otherwise be covered by commitments. And then at the 1-year level, we actually provide a significantly deeper discount than the default offerings. So it's no longer a trade-off if a workload happens to fit in a 1-year term. Now there's just extra savings that can be captured. And if a workload doesn't fit in a 1-year or 3-year term, savings can also be captured compared to on demand. So how do we actually do this? So under the reservation on Azure on the customer's behalf, so it's not that we purchase and then resell. The customer purchases this within their subscription through the platform. And then we add on a risk premium, which is a charge, right? That costs, and basically that cost comes from the savings of the 3-year reservation. So if we consider the 1-year insured commitment that we offer, you'll see about a 13% risk premium, which would reduce the savings from 58% to 45%. And that's how we get to a deeper discount compared to the default instruments, right? And then the risk premium, as the commitment term shrinks, the risk premium grows, because if you think about it, we're taking on more risk in that case where the customer kind of wants to offload that risk to us. So they pay for that in the case of a risk premium, but there's still significant savings left over. So 58% down to 30%. So comparing that to on-demand, where that's zero savings, this can be a quite attractive option, particularly for customers who want to maintain that flexibility. Taking a look at the menu of available services that can fall under reservations and savings plans, there are quite a few. I think most people are probably familiar with virtual machine reservations and savings plans, but there are other kind of compute offerings out there. There are more advanced services like Azure Databricks, Azure ML, even Microsoft Fabric capacity units or OpenAI provision throughput units are available as commitments from Microsoft. And we ensure anything that can be reservable on Azure. So this includes things like storage, databases, and of course, compute. To get started, all customers have to do is sign up on Azure Marketplace. We collect their cost and usage data. So this is, purely cost and usage, no, private data, personal data, banking, financial, healthcare data, anything like that. Just cost and usage data, fairly easy to obtain through the cost and usage report. And then once we have that data, the platform surfaces savings opportunities for the customer to review and basically analyze for rate optimization. So fairly easy to get started. So yeah, please add your questions to the Q&A. You can also take a look at the QR code on the right to go right to our offering and get started in the Microsoft Commercial Marketplace. The platform itself is free. It's just the insured commitments, which are optional, that are the paid kind of component to the offer. So try it out. Let us know what you think. And you can also schedule a demo with our team by going to archera.ai/start Azure. So from there, I'll actually launch a demo, and I'll stop sharing for a moment here and reshare. Great. So once you do get started and connect your cost and usage report, you'll see a screen that looks quite a bit like this. These are, of course, supplied numbers, and your numbers will look different. But the idea is it provides right up front an immediate savings analysis between your on-demand spend and the potential savings from any, well, in this case, the balanced plan, but there are several other plans that it'll recommend based on your needs. So there's usually an immediate savings opportunity there, particularly given your commitment coverage. If you have a high coverage, there's going to be maybe less savings opportunity, but still material. If you have a low commitment coverage, the savings opportunities could actually be even greater. From there, you can actually explore other kind of commitment plans. Those are what I mentioned. So I think balanced was kind of surfaced on that front screen, but there are also recommended and high savings plans. And you can create custom plans as well, where you can actually go down the list and kind of review infrastructure that can be covered by this plan, and make choices as far as, do we want 30-day commitments, 1-year commitments, or 3-year commitments, and so on. And this will take me down the page again. Sorry about that. This will return me to the commitment planner. So it supplies some kind of pre-built plans for you. So you can kind of see, okay, the recommended savings plan is based on 30-day insured commitments. The balanced savings plan is based on 1-year commitments. And then the high savings plan has actually got some 3-year commitments mixed in to cover those workloads with higher longevity and get an even deeper discount. So you can kind of see it grows as you move to the right side of the screen. To view the details of the plan, you can actually click in and take a look at the services that are covered by the proposed plan. So if I take a look at this, we've got Azure Container Apps, Azure App Service, Storage, SQL Database, and Virtual Machines. But of course, for most people, Virtual Machines is going to make up the majority of the consumption, but you'll see some advanced services mixed in there too when you have them in your environment. The savings are kind of tallied there, service by service. And you can see overall the monthly savings for this plan would be nearly $16K, and it's made up of 99 contracts that the tool intelligently kind of collects and surfaces. for your review. You can also hover over this to see exactly what the premium charge is. But one thing to keep in mind, that's all. This green number is always net of fees, so the premiums are already kind of included in that. It's not going to reduce savings at the end of the day. It's what you see is what you get. You can also kind of click into the edit button here to kind of view different commitment offerings for a particular service. So in this case, it makes it really clear what the comparison is between kind of 3-year, 1-year, and 30-day commitments. So of course, 3-year gives you 48.9% discount, which is the deepest discount that Azure offers for this particular service. In which, if your workload is predictable enough for 3 years, that's always going to be the best option. We can't really improve on that. What we can improve on is the 30-day and 1-year commitments, where you can see, for example, the 1-year default Azure savings plan would save only 26.1%. Our 1-year savings plan would actually save 36.7%. So a significant discount with no change in the commitment term. And then the 30-day insured savings plan can actually save 24.4%. So the real comparison there is between on demand and the 30-day, because you're not really sacrificing much flexibility with a 30-day commitment, but you're still able to capture savings. So it's pretty easy decision in most cases. So it'll take me back. And then you can kind of take a look at the commitment inventory to take a look at some existing commitments. So for example, once you've actioned on a plan, you have some commitments in your inventory, you'll see something like this, where most of these, Azure Cash for Redis and the Compute Savings Plan, these are all in positive savings territory. So you are saving money with these. And then in this case, this is a case where this Azure Cash for Redis commitment is going underutilized, right? Something is not consuming this. And so in a normal case, you'd be in negative savings territory if you just purchased a standard compute savings plan, or sorry, actually in this case, it's a reserve capacity for Redis. And the monthly loss on that would be more than $1,000. Multiply that by the number of commitments you're purchasing in an account, that can actually be a significant loss, and the reason why people tend to undercommit. But with us, we're actually rebating this. So we are paying the customer, in this case, to keep them cost neutral on this. So instead of losing $1,000 per month, they're cost neutral, and they've basically protected themselves against the downside risk of overcommitting in this case. So that makes it a fairly good decision in a lot of cases to convert on-demand consumption to these kind of 30-day commitment instruments, because you don't lose flexibility, but you do kind of gain discounts. So I'll stop there, and we can kind of take some time to address some of the questions.
Awesome. I'm going to come on here on camera again to read off the questions. And we're sorry that Joshua wasn't able to join, but Taylor, I think he did a great job covering much of what he was going to present as well. So hopefully you'll be able to handle all these questions. So we'll see what we can throw at you to give you some curveballs here. So a couple questions we had. The first one is, if Archera is taking on underutilized commitments and paying customers back, how is Archera profitable?
Yeah, great question. Because you could come in and you could commit to something and then you would underutilize. Think of it as insurance, because it is essentially insurance, where we have an entire pool of customers all kind of paying these risk premiums to protect themselves against the same downside risk. So if it were one customer and that one customer underutilizes, of course, that would not be a profitable venture. But just like car insurance, health insurance, home insurance, it's spread out the risk that is across our customer base. So they're all paying in these risk premiums, and then now and then low single-digit % of customers end up underutilizing that commitment, and we simply pay them out from the insurance pool that we've collected from these risk premiums. So that's why we're profitable.
Awesome. Next up, we have a really great question. Does this introduce any challenges with selecting Azure native savings plans or reserved instances? Or how would a customer manage Azure native savings options in tandem with the resources covered by the savings you offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Archera platform actually allows you to manage those default commitments straight from the platform and review them in the commitment inventory. So you'll be able to track them once you purchase them and see kind of what infrastructure is covered by those commitments. It's all designed to be managed from a single pane of glass. And in fact, if you purchase default commitments or native commitments without insurance, there's no cost of doing so. The platform is free and allows you to kind of take that action for free. You pay the cloud provider, of course, as you normally would, but there's no additional cost from us to do so. So you can mix and match. We didn't take a detailed look at kind of customizing a plan in the demo, but that's exactly what you would do that for. You could mix in native commitments where needed. And then particularly for the 3-year commitments, that's always going to provide a deeper discount. We can't really improve on a native 3-year commitment. It's the 1-year commitments where there's kind of a decision to make. Do you want more discount? Usually the answer is yes. And then of course the 30-day commitments, that's the comparison between on demand. So you would mix those in based on the longevity and the predictability of the workloads that you're trying to cover.
Okay, and next up, this question's again kind of about our pricing and how we make money. So just, I think, just summing up, if you could kind of give a overview of how Archera is priced, what customers like, because I know you're mentioning things that are free, some things that are not free, what the customer pays for, what they don't pay for.
Yeah, the only thing that the customer pays for is the risk premium. So I'll bring this slide back up to kind of illustrate, what percentage of savings this tends to be. So in this case, where someone's making an Azure reservation and it's a 3-year reservation, there would be kind of a 58% savings that we could draw from to kind of say, okay, we're going to take a portion of this to insure it and protect the customer against downside risk. In the case of a 1-year reservation, we're only taking 13% as the risk premium, so fairly small, and they keep most of the discount. In the case of a 30-day reservation, our risk is greater, so we're taking a greater risk premium to kind of fill the insurance pool that I mentioned before. And so the savings for the end customer is less, but the flexibility is significantly greater. And so this is how we make money. This risk premium is paid to us via the Azure Marketplace, and it's an Azure Marketplace transaction. So that's how we're profitable, and the rest of the platform is free. The theory is, right, if you can orchestrate native commitments yourself in the Azure portal, why would we charge for that capability? That just doesn't seem right. And what we really add as a unique value is this kind of insured commitment product, and so that's what we charge for.
Okay, yet another question about sort of the structure of this. So are we Azure reseller? Is that how this works?
No, we're not. That is a great question, though. That's a model that exists out there where someone can be an Azure CSP and they can get kind of a discount from Microsoft, pass along some portion of that discount to their customers, and kind of move reservations and savings plans around to kind of manage them that way. That's not what we do. So if you work with a CSP partner, continue to work with them. If you consume directly from Microsoft, continue to do that. This actually orchestrates native commitments in your subscriptions, and we don't resell in any way. We rely on partners for that when the customer wants it.
Awesome. And now we have a question about customer realized net savings. So is the risk premium for a 30-day Archera reservation 28% of 30% or 28% overall? So in this case, in the question, the end user would only be realizing 2% savings?
No, it's 20% overall. So the end customer is actually realizing 30% savings compared to on demand. This is basically this bar as it fills up is, just imagine it filling up this kind of 58% savings bar up here. So the 30-day reservation under the hood is this 3-year reservation. And so we're consuming some of the savings for our risk premium. And so when you review kind of the green savings numbers in the portal, that's all net of fees. So the number is what you see is what you get. You'll actually realize that 30% savings, or service by service, the percentage savings will differ. Right? This is a VM example, but databases are a bit different. It'll always show you the number up front of the portal, though.
Okay, this is another interesting question. Any limitations with the type of Azure offers that are supported with the solution? If a customer is on a CSP subscription with another partner, are they unable to use Archera? Does it matter if it's an EA or an MCA?
Great question. So the thing that really matters is focus exports, right? So focus is a format that Microsoft agrees to and contributes to as a standard. A lot of other companies out there, other cloud providers and so on, all kind of abide by the focus format. So as long as the subscription outputs a cost and usage report in that format, we can ingest that data and provide recommendations. So there are some legacy, like MOSP as an example of this on kind of the Microsoft side, legacy subscription types that don't support focus exports. And in that case, migrating your billing to a modern kind of billing standard will actually allow this to be supported. To answer the question kind of more specifically, CSP is supported. EA subscriptions also support focus format. MCA supports focus format, and a Mac falls under MCA and also supports focus format. So if you have a Mac agreement, this is supported too. And we want to, customers have their own preferences about which subscription type they're using. We allow customers to maintain that. So as long as it's on a modern format, we can support it.
Awesome. We have a really healthy Q&A session going here, Taylor, which is great. So I don't think we've been able to stump you yet, but maybe we will. So another question: what's involved in offboarding with Archera? So unfortunately, we don't want anybody to do that, but what happens for the customer in that case if they want to break their relationship with Archera?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So it is a marketplace subscription that you can cancel anytime. So from a platform perspective, you're free to onboard, offboard, at will. Where it gets a little complicated is if you do have an assured commitment in place, you have a couple of options. One is if you kind of walk away from that, there's no way for us to really rebate you for underutilization of that commitment. So what you could do is just kind of say, well, these commitments, we're going to utilize them, so we don't really care, and we'll just offboard. If you think you might underutilize those commitments, there's still kind of a benefit to remaining on board so that we can kind of continue to rebate you for that and kind of keep you cost neutral. So that's just something to consider. You're basically, giving up the benefits of the platform when you leave, but there's nothing that would, keep it installed. It's completely under your control.
Awesome. Here's another question. Is there any kind of minimum commitment to use the Archera service? In this, they give an example of an SMB customer with 20 VMs versus an enterprise with, 1,000 storage accounts.
Yeah, no minimum commitment, and that comes from kind of how we price this. So it's really commitment by commitment. We have this kind of risk premium that we collect in the case when a customer selects an optional kind of reserve commitment. So a customer could actually pay $0 forever and continue to use the platform for free, and we have customers doing that, and we're happy to service them. It does benefit us because we get to ingest more cost and usage data. So if you think about it, it actually helps us refine our risk calculations from an insurance perspective. So we still get some value out of that, and that's why we want to keep that kind of free model going for the platform. So no minimum commitment. And in fact, even when you do purchase an insured commitment, there's no like upfront payment for that either. So there is a commitment involved where you're kind of continuing to pay month to month if you do select an insured commitment, but none of it is required to be upfront payments either. So worth mentioning.
Awesome. So I have one final question. I just wanted to add that, another thing that we do include free, and Taylor, I don't know if you want to talk about this before you answer my question, is, customer success services are included free with Archera. So we'll work with you to customize your plan. We run into companies that don't want to do everything on their own. We have FinOps expertise in-house. We want to work with you any way you can to support you and your cloud journey. So my final question was, I just wanted to know, I know we're going to be doing a whole series on Azure, and our next webinar, which we want to do, is on the topic of Mac. I was wondering if you just talk about what we're doing to support Mac in brief, and then just as a little teaser for, and we will be sending out, when we send out the recording, we'll send a link to register for this upcoming webinar, which will be next month sometime. We're still finalizing the date, but if you just talk a little bit about our support for Mac.
Yeah, absolutely. So a Mac agreement, of course, is a Microsoft Azure consumption commitment that a customer can agree to between them and Microsoft to kind of say, okay, over 3 years, 5 years, I've even seen 10-year agreements, they're going to consume a certain amount, year over year. And at the end of the agreement, if they've consumed that amount, great, they got a terrific discount. If they didn't consume that amount, that's too bad. And they kind of owe that commitment, or they owe that consumption to Microsoft, or owe that payment to Microsoft. So that's essentially the downside risk of a MAC agreement and what we would insure against. And so it's foundationally, it's the same kind of commitment insurance that we provide for reservations and savings plans, but at a larger scale, and it applies across all Azure services because a Mac is, it provides a kind of a flat discount with optional kind of service-specific discounts within it. So we support that. If you think about, I guess, just to throw random numbers out there, if you have a customer considering a $50 million Mac, and they're thinking, well, our consumption plan supports that, but my CFO says that there's actually risk that this migration or that migration won't happen in time, and we'll actually probably consume only 40 million if those risks come to fruition, I guess. That leaves a potential $10 million shortfall on that MAC agreement. So before the MAC agreement is signed, we would help ensure kind of that potential downside of $10 million in that example. So that's kind of a teaser. There's more kind of specifics to talk about in terms of how we price the risk premiums, deductibles, like how this actually works when customers sign these agreements and so on. So that's material for the next webinar, but hopefully that provides a bit of a teaser.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you to the whole audience for all the wonderful questions. We love an active session like this. Again, we'll be sending out the recording probably within the next 24 hours, along with a link to register for the next session, which will be next month sometime. We just want to thank everybody for attending today, and please have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.